One thing that's remained constant through the entirety of the Super Mario Bros. Franchise are its boss fights, which usually cap off the ends of worlds or even the game itself, resulting in some of the most unforgettable moments. Now, I've already created a few past videos on this topic, but wanted to perfect / redo a couple in specific, resulting today in looking at the best and worst boss fights in every Mario game, going into detail explaining why they deserve to be showcased. If there's more than one, then I'll definitely mention them, or if there's none for some reason, I'll also go over that as well. Oh yeah, before I get started, my name is Copycat, and if you guys haven't yet, then please subscribe to my channel, hitting that bell button to stay notified when I upload new videos. The very first entry in the series is Super Mario Bros. For the NES, where I think it's pretty safe to say that the final of the game, the World 8-4 Bowser fight, is by far the best. This is really only due to the fact that this last fight is actually against the real King Koopa himself, as it's revealed that all of the previous bosses have been other enemies that have been transformed and placed in castles as a decoy. These ones are an easy fit for the worst boss fights, only because it's really annoying to continuously see Toad say, "The princess is in another castle." I do get that this really isn't that bad of a thing, especially as every fight is very similar in just having to touch the axe to destroy the bridge and defeat Bowser. Super Mario Bros. 2 for the NES is next up in this video, possessing a couple of great bosses, starting with the Masked Gate. This is an absolutely shocking foe to come across, as it usually acts as the door you have to enter to complete a stage, but for some reason in this case, it comes to life and begins to attack you. Defeating it is pretty simple, as you just have to throw a mushroom block at it 3 times. Then it will allow you to travel to the next amazing boss fight I want to look at, against the game's ultimate baddie, Wart. As you can see, this foe is an ugly looking anthropomorphic toad, who periodically spits out deadly bubbles that you need to dodge. All you have to do is wait until the dream machine in the room produces vegetables, which you can grab and throw towards Wart 6 times, which will eventually defeat him. On the worst fight side of this video, I have to include the Claw Grip, only because the mechanics of this battle are a bit lackluster, where you just have to throw back the rocks that it throws towards you. There's really nothing else in this room that can get in your way, other than the giant crab, so I can't imagine anyone dying too many times in this specific spot. One battle that is extremely difficult and only makes the bad side of this video for that reason is the Fry Guy, as it can be really easy to take damage from this foe as he moves very erratically around the place you find it. After 3 initial hits with a mushroom block, it then splits into 4 smaller but equally annoying versions of itself, jumping around the stage, needing to be extinguished to finally be defeated. Now, the battle itself is not what's bad, as it can actually be pretty fun, but it's just how easy it is to die and lose a life during this fight, being one of the moments in this title that to this day gives me trouble. The final of the original trilogy, Super Mario Bros. 3, was released for the NES in 1990, and its best boss battle by far is the final of the game against Bowser in his World 8 castle. This one is a bit different, as instead of straight up damaging the King Koopa, you need to get him to ground pound the floor, as it causes it to break away, eventually revealing a hole that leads to a deadly void. Once Bowser accidentally plunges himself into the abyss, then the battle is over, and you have a very different, but definitely memorable experience in rescuing the princess in this 3rd installment. Another boss I want to mention as being great to face off against is Lemmy, who's part of the Koopalings that have transformed all of the kings into mindless creatures. Lemmy is found in the airship at the end of the Iceland, World 6, moving back and forth on his magical ball while attacking you with a series of smaller balls that you have to avoid. I do get that just having to stomp these types of bosses 3 times to defeat them is mind-numbingly simple. I just have to make note of this one, as it at least offers up a bit of a unique feel. Now, in terms of worst fights, I think it's pretty obvious and safe to say that the Boom Boom ones can be shown off here, as they are so pointless to fight and don't offer up any challenge. This is all because it only takes 3 bonks to fully defeat them, where no matter what variation you're facing is not hard, meaning it only takes a few seconds to actually complete these battles. Up next is the true Japanese sequel, released only in Western markets under the title of Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, where again I'd have to say that the World 8 boss battle against the real Bowser is the best. To reiterate, this is all because this is the real King Koopa and not an imposter, meaning the satisfaction of defeating the real deal is what makes it so good. On the flip side of things, I'd have to say that the worst fight is definitely against Bowser's brother, who can be found in the 3rd level of World 9, also known as Fantasy World. What's so strange about this one is that you can actually bypass even having to battle, or I guess pass this foe, as you just need to jump to the platform at the top of the screen and run straight to the goal. The first handheld entry in the series is Super Mario Land for the Game Boy, which has 2 fantastic boss battles I'm going to mention that are both vehicle based in the one against the Dragon Zamzu and the Tatanga. In both instances, you're able to shoot projectiles from the machine you're controlling, having to use that mechanic to damage the bad guy you're facing and complete the stage. This is an experience that's very unique to the franchise, as there are really only a handful of times where Mario enters some sort of usable thing that he can transition through an entire level in, which you gotta admit is pretty cool. Now the worst of this title is the rock-based Hanoi Noi boss, who can be found at the end of the Eastern Kingdom. This one is just too easy, where you just have to jump off the Ganshin boulders the boss throws and use them to trigger the switch behind it. I guess just in comparison to the other fights you encounter, this one seems a bit out of place, and not in a good way. Next, we're gonna look at the bosses from Super Mario World for the SNES, where I think most people would agree that the final against Bowser can be considered the best. Here you have to fight him on the top of his castle while he's in his Koopa clown car, where he throws Mecha Koopas, rains down fire, and throws big steelies at Mario, while also ground pounding the stage from time to time throughout the battle. To deal damage, you have to bonk off the Mecha Koopas to paralyze them, then pick them up and flick them upwards so they hit the exposed top of Bowser. This one really is one of my favorites of the franchise, and really differentiates itself from the other bosses in this title. The only one that comes close to this in my opinion is the Big Boo, who you can find through a secret door up a vine in the Donut's secret house. In this instance against this ghost foe, you have to flick the grab blocks upwards to damage it while it's tangible. Otherwise, they will phase right through him. This isn't a hard fight, but just a moment I love finding as a young kid as it seems so out of place. Now, a boss that I always thought was a bit of a fizzle were the Reznors, who are a group of dinosaur baddies that ride a Ferris wheel-like platform, found at the end of most of the game's fortresses. I just never really found these that difficult at all, especially if you're equipped with some sort of power-up, as it makes these already easy foes that much more simple. The second entry in the Super Mario Land handheld series came out for the Game Boy in 1992, where the best boss from it is the final against Wario in the Stolen Castle. What's so interesting about this one is that you face off against 3 different versions of Mario's rival. The first just in his normal form, the second in bunny form, and the third in fire flower form, meaning it's a lot longer fight than the others in this game. Oddly, this is the only time Wario shows up in the entire franchise, other than in Super Mario 64 DS I guess, but I think we can all agree that he needs a comeback. Another boss I really like is the Witch of the Pumpkin Zone, mainly because it takes place in a pretty unique room, which is well done considering the limitations developers had at the time. What you need to do is dodge both the lids that blast off the cauldrons, and the spell she sends towards you, bonking off her when she periodically becomes visible. During my playthroughs, I found that the octopus boss is the worst, only because of the fact that it takes place underwater. Oh yeah, also it's very easy to bonk off the head of the cephalopod, and this is made even easier as you can actually jump out of the water at times, although you still have to ignore the smaller ones that can randomly fly in your direction. The first 3D-based game in the series is Super Mario 64 for the N64, where the best boss battles have to be the ones against Bowser, 3 of which can be found throughout Peach's castle. Although each variation gets slightly harder, the objective remains the same. Grab the king by his tail, swing him around very fast, then release him into a bomb to deal damage. This is really the only time Mario manhandles Bowser in this way, making these fights even more memorable. Another boss I really enjoyed due to its complexity is the Eye Rock, found within the pyramid in the Shifting Sandlands. The fight here is really against 2 gigantic hands with an eye in the middle of their palms, having to directly attack those pupils to damage it. This can be a bit tricky to get the hang of, as you need to time it when it isn't being defensive, but it shouldn't be too hard, and after a few hits you'll gain a star. If I needed to pick one boss fight that I hated, then that would be the one against the bully in the Lethal Lava Land, only because as a kid I must have died the most collecting that specific star. Now that I'm older, I know that you just have to spam jump kick to defeat it, as that ensures that you don't fall in the lava, but you have to ask yourself, is that really the way you want to play this game? Super Mario Sunshine for the GameCube is definitely an outlier entry in the series, as it revolves around using the FLUDD as your way to maneuver and defeat enemies, shown off perfectly in one of the game's best boss fights against the Mecha Koopa. Here you have to shoot water rockets from your device at the gigantic robot while you ride the roller coaster, which essentially turns the game into a third-person shooter, giving it a very different feel from the usual platforming. The final Bowser fight of the game also needs to be mentioned in the good category. Having to defeat the king and his son while they attack you from their bath on top of Corona Mountain. Here you need to dodge the wide array of attacks that Bowser and Bowser Jr. unleash towards you, while using the rocket nozzle so you can go high up in the air, then quickly ground pound so you can break the stage. This isn't the hardest boss battle in the world, but in a game that's oddly devoid of Bowser, I at least welcome his appearance. I actually had a hard time figuring out what the worst battle of this game is, but in the end, I decided that the underwater one against the Ely in Nico Bay barely edged out the Phantom Manta. It's the odd fact that you just have to clean this gigantic eel's teeth, as it's revealed that it's the black plaque that's causing it to turn evil. I guess at the end of the day, it's not the worst ever, but in a game with really great battles, it just doesn't hold up. Nintendo will return the series to its 2D platforming roots with new Super Mario Bros. For the DS, where one of the most memorable bosses from it is the Monty Tank, found at the end of World 6. This is actually a pretty tough battle, as the Monty travels very fast back and forth on the stage, while firing endless amounts of bullet bills in every direction. Also from time to time, the Monty will spring up from the hatch and throw bombs at you, where you either have to throw that bomb back to damage it, or bonk off its head, which can be a bit risky. Another boss I've seen a lot of people give praise to online is the Cheap Skipper, a giant ravenous cheep that jumps at you from the water at the bottom of the screen, along with its smaller minions. You just have to be patient and wait till it jumps towards you so you can bonk off its head / back to deal damage. This isn't the most difficult face-off, but at least a very different one against a really unique enemy. One boss that many people said they were disappointed in was Bowser Jr., as they just feel like each battle against him was way too easy, having to just bonk off him 3 times to win. He does at least throw Koopa shells at you, as well as periodically hide in his own shell so you can't jump on him, which at least adds something to these battles, but not much. However, by far the worst boss battles of this entry are the ones against Bowser, in both his normal and Dry Bones version, just having to trigger the switch behind him to destroy the bridge and complete the game. Even when I first played this, I made a note of how underwhelming this experience was, a mistake Nintendo would not make in their later entries. Up next is the space-based Super Mario Galaxy for the Wii, which has one boss I've seen at the top of most people's lists in the Bouldergeist, found within the Ghostly Galaxy. This boulder-based poltergeist throws a barrage of rocks towards Mario you need to dodge, with one of them being a bomb boo. What you have to do is spin to capture that boo, and have it explode on the boss to deal maximum damage. After a few hits, the Bouldergeist will spawn rock columns from the ground to try and block some of your boo bomb attacks, meaning this battle isn't exactly a walk in the park. The only other good fight I think that's worth mentioning is the final of the game versus Bowser, having to combat that foe in a series of different planets. This really makes great use of the ability to travel along spherical surfaces, needing to dodge Bowser's spinning shell attacks while dealing damage with your own spin attack in the process. Throughout my playthroughs of the game, I've noticed that there's one boss that can be completed without even breaking a sweat in the Bugaboom, found in the Honey Hive Galaxy. This is all due to you being powered up in B form, allowing you to just hover in midair and time your ground pounds to damage the bug. Even if you lose the power up, you could just recollect it on the stage, making this one almost impossible to lose. The second entry in the new Super Mario Bros. Sub-series came out for the Wii in 2009, where this version's final Bowser boss battle is incredibly well done. At first it just seems like it's the regular old, hit the switch to break the bridge to defeat the King Koopa, but Kamek appears at the last second to save and gigantify the big baddie. This then transforms the battle into a side-scrolling survival, where you have to avoid his fire and swipe attacks, all while waiting for him to destroy parts of the stage, as you're blocked at times unable to move forward. Eventually you'll make it to the end of the level where you can trigger another switch and finally defeat this menacing foe. This is an extremely memorable moment that definitely subverts what you'd expect from the usual bridge battles. In terms of the worst one you come across, that distinction goes to the Bowser Jr. fight of World 4, as it's so easy that it's almost pointless. All you have to do is hold a propeller block and use it to jet upwards, getting over top of the Koopa in his clown car, then drilling downwards to deal damage. Strangely, Bowser Jr. barely moves at all, so I'd be shockingly surprised if anyone has ever died here, let alone take any damage. The second game in the Super Mario Galaxy series came out for the Wii in 2010, where I think the best boss fight from it is the one against the Boomsday Machine of Bowser Jr.'s Boom Bunker. This is an enormous tank/turret-like vehicle that's being controlled by Bowser Jr. at its very top, having to make your way up there and ground pound on it by using the Cloud Flower. You have to be very careful, however, as the machine has sections with massive fire bars, fans that suck you in and throw you off balance, as well as electrified projectiles it shoots towards Mario. A similar and also great boss battle is the one against the Mega Hammer, again controlled by Bowser Jr., but here in his fearsome Fleet Galaxy. What you need to do is ride on your dino buddy Yoshi, as this is the only way you can eat up the bullet bills and shoot them back at the weak points of the machine. At times, Bowser Jr. will slam down the Mega Hammer's massive hammer hands to create shockwaves, adding a whole nother element to this already creative battle. One boss that really sticks out like a sore thumb is the Sorbetty, the planet-sized snowman found with the Freezy Flake Galaxy that I have to say is bad. The objective here is to use its body as your way to platform while avoiding its head that will stop at nothing to try and crush you. You have to spin attack its glowing red nose, which is his weak spot, but this is easier said than done, as it's actually grueling to try and avoid its attacks. The next game Nintendo will release is Super Mario 3D Land for the 3DS, combining 2D aspects of the series with a 3D realm, which becomes apparent in the best of its battles in the final ones versus Bowser. In World 8, you have to chase the boss through an obstacle course that has breakaway blocks, tight ropes, and even a fake death from the King Koopa, leading to an even more intense chase afterwards. This was an unexpected moment that I'm glad changed things up from the regular boring bridge areas that we talked about earlier in the video. Now, I think it's pretty obvious that the Boom Boom and Pom Pom are the worst bosses of this game, again where facing them is just plain old too easy. It doesn't matter what form or what arena you battle them in, or even if you have to battle both at the same time, they just don't challenge you enough, especially in a game that has plenty of power-ups. The third installment of the new Super Mario Bros. Sub-series was released for the 3DS, oddly given the moniker of the second game. Anyways, my absolute favorite boss fights from it are the ones against the regular and dry Bowsers. Like the previous entry, it looks like you just have to trigger the switch and end the fight, but instead the Koopalings swoop in here to revitalize their boss to better than full health. This is because they create a giant Bowser that takes up the entire screen, having to platform Mario upwards while dodging deadly fire and his swipe attacks. Once you trigger the switch at the top, you'll save the princess and end this surprisingly well done fight. The only Koopaling battle I enjoyed was the one against Ludwig von Koopa, as it contains the really cool mechanic of being able to enter a cannon and blast Mario towards that foe. You have to do this when the Koopaling hangs from the chains on the ceiling, being able to shoot him off and leaving him open for an attack. Again, the Resners show up in this title, so I have to include them as some of the worst in the game. Here actually multiplying in numbers in some instances, but unfortunately not increasing the difficulty. There's honestly not much else to say about them. They're just dumb, boring looking dinosaurs that show up in most of the tower stages. The Koopaling battle that can fit into this video as bad is the one against Roy, only because he barely attempts to attack you at all. Yes, the walls do close in on you, but they do this relatively slow, still leaving you tons of room and time to kill him. The final installment of the new Super Mario Bros. Sub-series came out for the Wii in 2012, where again I'd have to say that the boss fight against Bowser and Bowser Jr. here needs to be mentioned. Instead of any Switch-based gameplay, this Ultimate Showdown is actually a straight-up battle, with you needing to knock the Kid Koopa out of his clown car so you can use it to damage the king. You do have to tread a bit carefully as Bowser is much bigger than usual, so trying to stay away from him until you're actually able to attack him is your best bet. Another boss I've seen many people online say they like is Ludwig von Koopa. being the best of the Koopaling battles of this title. This version of the weird-haired baddie floats in mid-air and splits into 3, summoning fire-based spells to rain down on you trying to hurt you. You just need to dodge these as long as possible before he eventually lowers to the stage, leaving his true self open for a bonk. Now in terms of terrible bosses, that honor, or I guess dishonor, goes to Larry, the Koopaling foe that could be found within the Sparkling Waters area. This is all because his final fight of the world revolves around water geysers that oddly protect you from the boss's attacks, as you can just use them to stay up in the higher portion of the screen. I really could have included the Boom Boom here and no one would have batted an eye, but at least those fights are expected to be easy and not embarrassingly simple like this one. One entry that's packed full of great bosses is Super Mario 3D World for the Wii U, where definitely every face-off against Bowser needs to be showcased as good. The first time you encounter him is at the end of World 1 during his Highway Showdown, where you have to chase the boss on a long road while trying to destroy the car he's riding in. This is done by kicking back the bombs he tries to unleash towards Mario, while also avoiding the fire he rains down to the ground from time to time. The other battle where you encounter the King Koopa is the final of the game in the Tower of the World Castle, but here he's powered up with a Super Bell, donning the name Meowser instead. This is not a fight, and instead is a race to the top of the skyscraper, having to skillfully platform while avoiding the mini attacks by this interesting foe. Eventually Meowser will also use the Cherry power-up, splitting off into mini clones, adding a whole nother layer and needing to get to the top, and triggering the massive POW block to destroy them. Now, I'm just going to briefly mention the Boom Boom and Pom Pom as being bad, as at this point I feel like you must be sick of me talking about them. But at least these versions do some drastically different things, albeit it doesn't really make them any harder. The Boom Boom can now turn invisible from time to time, but still acts basically the same, just spinning around the room, eventually getting dizzy enough so it can be easily attacked. The Pom Pom now creates several clones of itself to confuse you, but its true self can be easily distinguished, as long as you're paying attention to its differences. Up next is the massive Super Mario Odyssey entry for the Switch, where my favorite battle from it is the one against Bowser, trying to rescue the princess on the moon. This one's all about having to use Cappy so you can capture Bowser's boxing glove hat for yourself, using it as your means of beating up the baddie once he lets his guard down. After a few sock and bopper moments, things transition to the real reason why this battle makes this video, being able to capture Bowser himself. Here you have to platform your way to the end of the stage while going on an absolute rampage, being able to spam your fire breath as well as swiping your claws to break away any bricks or blocks in your path. This really is an unforgettable moment that's a standout in an already unforgettable game. Another fight that blew me away when it showed up is the one against the Ruined Dragon, the giant monster Bowser takes control of in the Final Fantasy-esque Rune Kingdom. What you have to do to defeat this formidable foe is platform atop its head while trying not to get electrocuted by the strange energy it emits. Once there, you have to remove every stake from its noggin, ground pounding the weak spot that appears to deal your strike. I won't lie, when I first saw Bowser riding this behemoth, I had no clue how Mario would be able to even fight it. But after all these years, I should have learned to never have doubted the mustachioed man. The only main boss I'm going to pick as bad from this game is the one against the Mollusk Lancer, found in the Seaside Kingdom. I just feel like this particular battle is very hard to maneuver in, as you need to capture the Gushon and use its water spouting abilities to clear the lava off the enormous dome of the baddie. However, even if you uncover its weak spot, it's still hard to ground pound as it moves incredibly fast, so be prepared to miss a few several times. The one brutal boss that I feel like is the worst of the game is Topper, only because he sends out a swarm of hats that appears on the stage that are tough to avoid. This is really exemplified on the darker side of the moon, where there's even more hats you need to tiptoe around compared to your previous face-off. The final game we're going to look at is the Bowser's Fury game mode that was released alongside the re-release of Super Mario 3D World for the Switch, where I think the best boss fight moment from it is the one against Giant Bowser. This is during the last section of the game where you need to ride Plessie and try to chase down the enraged foe, getting close enough to burst its stolen Gigabells to use them for yourself. Once you're able to skillfully avoid everything he throws at you, you're able to collect the power-up and transform Plessie into its Giga Cat version, squashing and defeating the King Koopa in this weird state. Okay, I get I'm beating a dead horse, but I'm just gonna have to say that once again the Boom Boom appears here, and yes, his fight is the worst. He does turn invisible, and he is catified, but honestly those two features aren't helping him at all as it's still way too easy. Alright, that's gonna be it for today's video, guys. I really hope you did enjoy this one. If you did, please leave a like, comment below if I left any bosses out that should have been mentioned, and of course subscribe to my channel. Also, please go follow my Instagram at CopyCatGamer. There I upload some cool clips and items from my collection that you won't see anywhere else. Hope you guys all have a good day, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!